victories that we've had over the years. A really interesting one that's close to here is maybe some of you have ridden up Highway 5 and gone through Arbuckle. But Arbuckle used to have horrible housing for farm workers and the Mexicano people. There wasn't any housing. It was what existed was miserable. There were leftover. There was a camp called Alexander Camp where a lot of farm workers and families lived. Okay, and I was working for migrant education, and my job was to work with the families and the children. And the county of Colusa was going to close down Alexander Camp in December. And all the single men were gone. There were about 40 families still living there. And so through my work, I sort of did some organizing, but it wasn't the kind of organizing that Migrant Ed liked. It was more, I did like organizing, and I went house to house. I talked to all the families. We found some people who were really, I identified some people who were really good, had good analysis, could understand things, and a lot of leadership ability. And I called some organizers who were FUFW people who ran some kind of little nonprofit thing in Marysville, Yuba City. And basically I didn't have to do a whole lot more, but I was part of it, got it started. And if you drive up there now, there's all these little houses to the west of the freeway. That's what was created out of that. All the housing, the single houses that went into there, new apartment complexes built with a park and childcare and all this stuff. It just like drastically changed our lives in like 2 years. It was an incredible process. That was a real concrete one that I got to see. That made me feel good. Another one that I felt really proud of was the Breakfast for Niños program. I had helped the Black Panther Party with their free breakfast program in Sacramento. It was in the Oak Park neighborhood. They served out of this church, and they'd start about 6 in the morning every day, and I would be there at 6 in the morning to help. Out of about 100 kids a day, probably a third were Mexicano kids, Mexicano children. And I figured I wanted to be there and influence those kids, and so I went every day. And I saw how they did it, I saw how they cooked, they explained how they got the donations, they explained the whole process to me of how to do it. And I came back, I think it was in spring, it was in the summer. I met with 2 other people that I was in the mini corps with. It's a migrant education mini corps. We were going to be teachers. And 3 of us came back to Sacramento and organized the Breakfast for Niños program. We wrote it up. We went and did presentations with little church groups, old ladies, whoever we could get donations from. We got donations from Foremost Milk, Crystal Dairy. We got butter donated, tortillas from the tortilleria. We did all these things, and we started a program. And school started, and so we went to one of our Chicanos, professors, and we said, hey, can we create a class so we can get credit for all this work that we're doing? And he said, yeah. And so that became the Breakfast for Niños, class that they had at the university, and a lot of kids got credit for it. And we started with the 3 of us, and it ended up being like a whole classroom of students, maybe 30 students who did it, and it went on for years and years and years, like maybe 15, 20 years. It was in the downtown Washington neighborhood, held at the Washington Neighborhood Center on 16th and D. A couple of years ago, I met a woman across the street from the center who said her little kids had been in the Breakfast for Niños program. I was like, yeah, cool. So yeah, there's lots of victories. It's just some don't seem so obvious. We fought for. While I was in Mexico, we fought for workers' rights. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but those 2 kind of stand out as being part of the movement and what we were fighting for in those days.